Welcome to the Design YouTube channel. I'm Hugh, and today's video is part of a webinar series. Get ready for an engaging session ahead that will probably give you a lot of new information. Thank you, and hope you enjoy the video. Hello guys, welcome to the second part. In this part, we will talk about the horror genre. We're going to go into discussing a bit about the the artist's perspective. Let's put it that way about this topic. And we are going to sketch some stuff, and you'll see me doing like 3 main sketches, and then we will take one forward. Now, that being said, if you check my screen right now, when it comes to like the horror stuff, you will notice that there is a clear understanding of like what I'm trying to depict here. So I'm going to do like 3 different types of characters. So one is like a ghostly character that I'm working on right now. Of course, this video is sped up. The point is basically to showcase you guys in a quick manner what can be done. And of course, what you'll notice here is me going through the process of sketching stuff out. So in the general idea of what's going on is basically that we'll have this character that we're working on, which is a ghostly figure that has like a hole inside of his chest. Like it's a sort of character that actually takes souls. That's kind of the general idea. It actually floats. It's actually pretty dark, and of course we're gonna do another character which will be more like a jack-o'-lantern type of character, and you'll notice me how I actually start to like push certain shapes, make the wicked smile and so on and so forth, add a hat to the fellow, and actually go with trying to process the overall designing of this fellow here. The main point that you have to understand when it comes to like processing all these things is basically like you will have like different types of struggles if you're starting to design. Like if you don't have experience in designing characters, you'll have different types of struggles. But if you do have experience, you'll understand that there's some key elements that go into these type of characters that usually are designed for this genre. In the previous webinar, in the first part, you actually guys checked out, and we talked about the horror topic and the horror genre, and we went through like a bunch of different things. And this part is basically taking those things that we talked about and actually put them into practice, meaning that there are certain concepts like eerie, uncanny, certain elements that we're actually trying to process and actually put together. The whole idea here is basically that there are certain things related to design and dynamism, and as you probably notice, I'm trying to, like, the first character that is floating is somewhat interesting and it's somewhat dynamic, but I believe the second one that I did, the jack-o'-lantern, is a lot more dynamic. It's a lot more strong. It has a lot more strength. It has a very strong diagonal and like a very good proportion in that manner. You don't have to be perfect or perfectionistic with the process itself. The whole idea or the whole point that you're trying to develop is there to actually showcase your ability, your capability of whatever you can actually achieve. Therefore, usually when you start designing or whatever you're going to try to design, it doesn't have to be perfect at the beginning. You can actually do adjustments later on. You can process different issues. And as you'll notice here, like in terms of technique, I'll actually use line quite a lot. And we'll go through that process of developing it with line. So, for example, this last character was a sort of like a weird character, and I was checking proportions, and you see me doing adjustments there, and making this like sign like a be quiet type of thing. It has 3 eyes, it has like a crown and so on and so forth, and it's strange enough to be looking eerie. And of course, like I'm trying to adjust proportions in that sense. So imagine you will see this type of character in a Dark Souls game, in essence, that is just laying there, or it's an NPC that tells you like to be silent or don't make sounds because there's something dangerous going on. And now in this part of the process, like as we continue, we're going into actually developing the jack-o'-lantern, and you see me like starting to work on different things. You'll see me doing some adjustments, in terms of proportion, because like the legs were like too short, and so I actually scaled the upper body. And of course, there I'm adding some extra design elements, meaning that my jack-o'-lantern will start to have some extra components attached to it. Therefore, the whole point of the fellow here is basically to make sure that it reads well and actually is really clear in terms of like overall silhouette. As I process the issues that are occurring on my screen, I actually go inside now, actually color the background a bit, and then go into actually starting to draw. Which means basically like I'm using a lot of like a drawing tool. So it's a drawing brush that I use here. I believe the brush itself is from Timofey. I think his name is Timofey Stepanov. You guys can hit him up and give him some love, you can actually grab his brush back there. And I believe the brush is used for drawing mostly. And I think it's a really great brush for drawing and sketching stuff out. I do enjoy it a lot. And you'll notice me that because I work with a lot of hatching, this actually enables me to actually draw pretty well. As the artwork itself progresses, like you see that the sketch is pretty loose and everything. Like we don't focus, too much on the tightness of the sketch. I usually keep my sketches pretty loose, so it's easy to modify. And most of the things I pay attention to some key foundational areas. So number one is like proportion usually. So proportion goes as being the most important area that I try to focus on. Then I go into shape language. So what is the main shape language after the proportion is set up? Which shape language is related to the general overarching shape language that is across the board. So you'll see me using a lot of like very strong angles, triangles in this case, for example. And of course, I'm going to use a round. So I'm going to combine the roundness with triangles, which make it ominous in essence to actually design in this manner. And you'll also have this effect where if you actually try your best to work within a shape language, things start to clarify a lot more. So you know that you should not focus, for example, on squares. If you're working with triangles, you do not have to focus on squares. So you limit basically your thinking basis to focus on those lines where you're actually trying to focus your effort, rather than actually going through a part where the effort is kind of like going through this range of too many options. Okay, so keeping your options limited from starting like from the sketch ideation phase, like you're sketching with line or shape, keeping that option limited helps out a lot. Keeping the option limited when it comes to like, okay, what kind of technical approach do I have to my design? For example, I'm working with line a lot here, and you see like it's starting to kind of like being fleshed out. And what happens is that the more you limit your options, the more you can focus on what it matters. And, what it matters, at least for me, is like, okay, how do I push design? How do I push shapes? And how do I make this character look interesting? The overarching type of thing you will have to process overall is mainly like how you combine those things to actually make it easy to understand, how to convey your message in a very easy manner. As the drawing you'll see progresses, the unique part of the character that I'm doing right now is, if you actually check it out, not even necessarily now, but even later or in the first phase, if you actually paid attention, is the silhouette. So this jack-o'-lantern is actually pretty skinny. We understand that it has like the details on the face, and of course the wicked smile actually makes it slightly evil. So we dabble into those areas where like, okay, we need to understand that this fellow is not necessarily like a friendly fellow. And you'll also notice there's some unique design decisions that I actually made, not necessarily in this part where I draw, but later on when it comes to like his chainsaw, right? So the chainsaw itself actually is being changed later on. You'll see that normally like I had a normal kind of standard chainsaw, but I actually changed or switched that and actually imbued with a lot more design on it. There's like certain things related to the expression of the character and certain type of anatomy. So for example, you see like how his shoulder there is actually weird. He has like a little hunch going on there as well. And I still keep attention to the way the character flows, downwards. And I keep those things in mind as I progress to like levels and actually making it. Another part is like that I consider, for example, for this specific character is his clothing. So, right, so I gave him a jacket, so it does have a jacket, and then it has like something underneath the jacket. At the same time, there are areas which actually convey purposefully this part where actually the whole thing comes together. We also notice that everything that is happening with the character itself right now, it's mainly building on top of the sketch. Okay, so you'll see there are certain areas that I'm still developing. So you'll see I go spirally on the arm there because like there's a slight twist, because like the sort of jacket's not fitting him well. And if you'll also notice that there are certain areas that I try to like create more contrast in certain spaces or places. Just simply because like I do have this belief where depending on the hierarchy of the elements that you're trying to put together, you'll have certain type of contrast. Another part when you do like let's say when it comes to like a monster design, I do believe you have the area of uncanny valley, right? So like how does this fellow look uncanny? Well, there are a couple of things. So first of all, is proportion that goes into the uncanny part. So if it's skinny, if it's tall, if it's weird, it's like a skinny weird with a big head. That means it's already pretty uncanny at that point. So it just foundationally starts with main proportions. Then it goes to like a certain type of twists. So you see like how I twist the arm there, like how I twist the shoulder, like the hunch of the character. All those components go to the uncanny part as well. And of course, you got areas like the heads that is holding as a belt, for example. Those actually become, disturbing alterations, let's call them. You have certain things about motion and behavior, like he's basically having this chainsaw, and you see me actually designing and creating this like a sort of like monster head that is like holding the chainsaw. Again, this was an idea that I had. Okay, let's test it out and see how it actually looks, and I actually enjoyed how it looks because it actually pushed the shape language of the chainsaw and didn't made it just a standard chainsaw. So you actually go through this process where you try to explore like and see, okay, what options would you have when it comes to like developing this type of character. You have to understand that this development of the character is one go. I usually go through a lot more iterations than what I'm doing here, simply because like I think iterations is some sort of essential component to like development of characters. But for this purpose of the demo, like I'm doing a lot of changes on the go, on the fly. Some things I enjoy about it, and some things I would probably change right now, since I'm actually recording after I did the actual drawing. There are things we have to keep in mind if we are going towards like a blood or gore type of stuff, or like those areas of gory and bloody. I believe there's a certain case to be made that not necessarily everything that is horror has to be bloody. You got topics like Slender Man, for example, and I think there's even a game, I believe, called exactly in that way, where we're going through this woods and the Slender Man follows you and so on and so forth. So you need to stay away from the Slender Man. That character specifically, is very very tall, straight, and skinny. So that actually, it's a pretty eerie character in essence. And therefore, you have to understand there's certain cues that you when you play the game happen. Therefore, those areas actually go and fall into the category of like, okay, what happens with this fellow character that we have? Because if it would sit straight, it will actually be decently tall, at least taller than average people. And of course, with a chainsaw that actually looks very dangerous, the entire scenario would actually be pretty grim. We can actually understand as well that since we're on the topic of Halloween, whenever you're working with these things for like these type of topics, it's good to just have fun with stuff. I would say you can either have fun with like some darker themes like I'm doing here, because this is kind of in the middle. It's somewhat stylized but still dark. But you also can go towards like more cute stuff, right? Like you do cute witches and cute jack-o'-lanterns. That is cool too. And there are people that actually go full on horror, and they actually develop things along those lines where it's like it becomes really dark, in essence. But and what you have to understand that even if I wanted to do a more darker theme, I don't think YouTube would have allowed it in that sense. Therefore, we're gonna keep with our nice jack-o'-lantern there to actually make it work. If we go and talk a bit about the narrative and symbolism, you'll notice that there's like certain elements to the design that I'm working on, including the current heads you're looking at. So those heads themselves, they're part symbolical as well. So the fact that this jack-o'-lantern, has a certain type of activity, he cuts heads off, for example. So the chainsaw, the heads, it's actually like very straightforward and clean that he collects heads, in essence. Now these components, when it comes to like the symbolism part, or certain things, like if I could have probably added some occult markings as well, because like this fellow creature is from hell, whatnot, and I would create like hints to a bigger mythos, in essence. There are also like you can also create some hidden details here and there if you're interested. So we'll also notice that we are adding this like component of like little pieces of like dried grass out of it. So we'll have these things kind of like being influencing the idea sort of that this character is not necessarily made out of flesh. So it's like it's based on this sort of inanimate type of character that is strange and weird, and it's not necessarily like easy to kill, for example, because if it loses an arm, it just builds another, or another one grows, let's say, for example. So it's actually really hard to actually delve and go against this character. When it comes to cultural influence, there are certain like folklore that goes from the or mythos, let's say, from the jack-o'-lantern. There are certain things that I try to kind of approach from a perspective of like what would be cool for this topic to develop it, and you basically look at different types of references for that matter to see like, okay, what are the interesting things. And of course, like there's some standards, let's say, that operates in the collective of human beings, and people accept that as being like a sort of a standard to work with. So, for example, a jack-o'-lantern that has that kind of collective approach understanding, it's very clear for most people to understand. Okay, that's a horror jack-o'-lantern. Very clear, very straightforward message. Is not hidden for that matter. But you can also go into the more like the hidden side of things, where you actually play with other type of components. So when I say other components, I mean like if you're doing an environment and you want to make a very eerie environment, very strange, you can actually work with color palettes or even textures, portraying decay, things that are worn, age textures, fog, all those things. Things similar to, like, I don't know if you guys know the project, but there's this project called Darkest Dungeon, and the Darkest Dungeon has this like type of feeling, like it's made with inking sort of thing, and it has like this type of overall arching feeling of like darkness within it. I also worked on a project called Damnation the Gothic game, which is a board game, and I had to work with a horror theme with like dark Gothic themes, and at the same time in that specific project I had to kind of develop the art direction for it, and of course like build the entire product from start to finish. It was an amazing experience in the sense that I had the ability to actually go and build the entire product, and actually had a successful Kickstarter campaign, and actually was released to the public. And what we have to understand, at least like for myself from those experiences, is that every time you work on a project, regardless of the theme, you'll actually encounter yourself with different types of problems to be solved, and you develop a problem-solving ability. So if people do have this feeling like, oh, well, if I would start to draw something for the purpose of Halloween, whatnot, or the purpose of horror, I would do a pretty bad job. Well, you shouldn't be daunted by the fact that you do necessarily a bad job. It's absolutely normal, since if you never explore this theme or topic. Things that develop in terms of like from skill set to understanding of topic or subject matter develop over time through like repetition and exercise. If you do check my portfolio, for example, on ArtStation, you'll notice that towards the bottom of the page, I've got some inking of characters and some pretty dark inks for characters and some sketches with like dark themes. So I've been exploring these dark themes for a while now. There's like a bunch of artists like from Dan Peacock, Maxim Berhin, and so on and so forth, that I mentioned previously in the previous part, that have these very well ingrained. Like I'm nothing compared to like what those guys can do, when it comes to that topic or subject matter. I could probably try to do something similar, but I don't think that I have the necessary understanding that or depth that they have, because they've been doing that their entire careers. The only thing that could be helpful is for me to shorten the space between like what they know and what I know, and try to do a lot of breakdowns of what they do and how they actually process those issues. Essentially, whenever you attach yourself to understand a theme or how to progress within a theme, I think it's crucial for you to have this place where like, okay, if I'm going to start working on XYZ, the idea or the whole point of working with it is to study, go towards more of a study methodology, approach it from a clear standpoint, and make sure that everything that you actually try to process there overall makes you understand what is the what are the qualities from an intrinsic standpoint, because you'll notice that depending on the artist or the artwork that is being created, you'll have like different types of topics kind of like being enhanced. So for example, if you go to Maxim Berehin, you'll also see this like decaying portraiture, for example, that I remember a lot. If you go to Dan Peacock, you get a lot of weird stuff. Jablonski, for example, does on these topics more like eerie rather than full-on horror or gore, right? It has some more eerie topics. And it can go on a subtle psychological level. It can actually subtly affect this horror idea and things related to our collective unconscious that as Jung says. But in essence, you'll see there are differences that are very clear in terms of like how they boundary themselves in to certain areas, and the focus will vary. You also see people that tackle horror in a very different manner. You'll see people that they depict these topics of Halloween or darkness in a cute manner. Well, that's a complete antithesis to the idea of horror, which is actually really interesting and fun to watch as well. Simply because like what people do there is basically they take something horrible and make it look nice. Okay, and actually it makes people laugh, or it makes people think about this could be fun, and so on and so forth. It's like you creating a theme park for Halloween for children. You cannot show decapitated people in that theme park, right? So it's like, okay, we're gonna go through this topic of Halloween and make it cute. And of course, like in some areas, even costumes, like if you get a cute ghost costume for a kid and going on trick or treat, in essence, that's kind of the same thing. Is where like the kid will look cute. It will not look scary whatsoever. Like I don't know, 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall, kid is not gonna be extremely dangerous in that sense, and we'll have like this cute costume. When it comes to things in relationship with, let's say, atmosphere, usually the sound and audio cues can actually create an atmosphere as well. So for example, if we move away from the artistic side of things that we're having on the screen, and we go more towards like the area of, let's say, video or things related to games or sounds, you'll notice that there's like certain type of glitches, distortions when it comes to animation. And if you think about, for example, the sound audio cues, you basically visualize sound. You think how sound impacts visuals. And oftentimes the combination between like really good sound, like jump scare sounds, or with some action that happens on the screen, or slow creakings, or in open spaces, whatnot. All those things create like this environmental storytelling, which gives an unpredictability to what's going to happen next, right? So the idea of like pacing and tension building is this whole idea of unpredictability. So like how things are becoming less predictable in essence. Now, getting back to our artwork there, you notice that we already did like a overall color base to what we're doing. And what you'll notice me doing right now is actually redraw the entire ground area, because like I didn't like what I had previously. I said, what, this is a bit, it's pretty cool, but it can be upgraded, right? So you'll notice me that I'm gonna do some like candy pieces and some little head of jack-o'-lanterns heads. I'm gonna do an apple there. So I can actually play with different elements right now to showcase like, hey, you know what? Let's take everything that we did. It's actually pretty cool. Let's make a ground to actually be more appealing and cooler in that sense. So we're adding little candies and chocolate bars and so on and so forth to make sure that the entire scenario it's overall built nicely. So we try to tidy up this area on the ground itself, simply because we have a pretty cool character that we did, and the ground area needs to be at least at par, in terms of like how it looks and feels. So we're also adding like a sort of like a background there. So we're trying to kind of frame the character in essence. We are doing the bats that we had previously in the back. Those bats were like the bats from Batman, by the way. But the whole point is like to go on the theme more or less. So anything that you build basically for the theme, I think it's essential to have like those things well made. And now you'll see me blocking out with like a base color for that, the ground. And then from like the base ground that I do with the color, then I actually go in and actually edit a bit some of the color areas that actually occur there. Another part I believe is really important to understand is, as you notice, like in terms of like the way it processed, certain components, I did make some modifications from like the previous version, and you'll notice that, okay, all these modifications that I did have to be more aligned to what I'm trying to do. And you'll notice that even the overall background, for example, I change it because like I think it's better to have like a darker background. It actually reads better. And if you check the color scheme, for example, you'll notice that most of the color scheme is pretty muted, beside the oranges that happen in the jack-o'-lantern, and of course what happens with certain areas that are more interesting in that sense. So it's mostly like we keep some areas with saturated color for highlight purposes, and the rest is pretty muted and desaturated in essence. It's a simple color scheme, by the way. Like it's not anything crazy. Like if you use like muted colors, for example, like very subtle muted colors, you can definitely work with in this manner, having muted colors and certain highlights that actually are depicted, for these purposes. And you'll see me like editing a bit, certain areas. You'll notice me adding a bit of candy there, adding a bit of color for like specific regions and areas. And then you'll see me actually getting to work not only on the background, but we actually get all these parts nicely depicted. Just a little base color, because we're doing like some sort of cell shading, and we're not doing anything absolutely crazy. We're not rendering a lot because we're reliant on the drawing here. So it's important, like if you have a good drawing, you can rely on it to actually do cell shading. It's actually gonna look not that bad. And now you'll see me actually taking an orange and actually do a Halloween writing. So I'm not using a typography for this. I'm just building it from scratch. So it's me just having fun with like, okay, if I'm gonna write Halloween, how am I gonna write it? And you'll notice exactly like how it actually follows up. And we actually notice here very clearly like that's an O, and we try to make it very nice and clean. And we basically find ourselves to actually, we're trying to frame this character, frame the Halloween typography there that we're trying to design, and then we'll actually getting to finish. So what I hope is you actually enjoyed this video. I hope you guys check our courses. Remember, we have some awesome courses. And yeah, that being said, check design.com and actually check out some cool stuff there. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. Check our video description for more resources, including courses, tips, feedback, and a lively community on Discord. I'll see you there.